I'll just introduce myself. My name is Alex Heffler, and I am the Alumni Relations and Events Officer here at Kellogg College. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you this evening Joy Richardson. Before we begin, I'll tell you briefly a bit about Joy. She is an actor, an artist, writer, and alumna of Kellogg's Masters in Creative Writing program. She has held 3 art exhibitions here at Kellogg, and we are very, very lucky here to also have her as our artist in residence, where she has delivered workshop lectures on the art of storytelling, the art of public speaking, and will now share with us the art of conversation. She is an award-winning actor, having graced the boards of none other than Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, the Royal National Theatre, Royal Shakespeare Company, and London's West End. You would have also seen her on many recognizable film and television projects as well, which would be too many to count. Today, Joy will be exploring the following: conversations with strangers, a leap of faith. A bit of housekeeping. Afterwards, there's going to be a short Q&A. And I will say we do have to finish promptly at 6:30, as we do have formals and stuff going on this evening. But we can continue to have the conversation going as well in the back, over teas and coffees, and bubbly as well. So without further ado, please join me in giving a very warm Kellogg reception to Joy Richardson.
Thank you everyone for coming here today. It's lovely to see you. And just to say that conversations with strangers, a leap of faith, has been something which has been brewing for some time. Over the past year, various people have mentioned to me that they need help or they feel they need to build up their confidence in being able to have conversations, especially with strangers, but also in an environment where they're called upon to go to conferences, to have interviews, so many occasions where we have to speak to strangers. Now, as for myself, my journey, if only, as I was saying to you, only someone had told me what I'm about to share with you now, because my journey has been quite painful. For half of my life, I really could not speak. I had a speech impediment, which you call a stutter or a stammer, where I would try to speak to people and then find that the words just couldn't come out. And me just doing this, I can feel the stammer coming back, because once you have it, although you're fluent, it's always part of you. And I had help from family, but also I had help from the City Lit Institute in London. And what they taught me, which is what I will include here, is that you can't fight yourself. You can't try to be something you're not. All you can do is understand it and be kind to yourself. And that's what they did. They taught me over a course of 8 weeks, once a week, 2 hours a week, just to understand, what is it? How do you feel when it's happening? When does it happen? Just claim it. Say to people, when I audition for something, and the table read is there, and everybody's fluent, and it's your first day, just say, hi, don't worry, I'm going to read really slowly, and I will stand up, but once I memorize the lines, I'll be fine. And once I claimed it over a period of 2 years, it started to vanish without any effort, which to me was a miracle, because half of my life I was not me. So, conversation with strangers, a leap of faith, is about how we step into our authenticity, not trying to be like anybody else, but ourselves. and how we learn to listen and respect what other people are feeling. Because it is about listening. It is about listening not only with your ears, but with your eyes, with your emotions, and just taking in, because I would say that a conversation is an exchange, a sharing of thoughts, ideas, emotions, and the space. And I'm going to focus mainly on face-to-face conversations, which is a different ballroom to if you are conversing using electronic format. We will find that electronic format has so much to offer and is necessary. We can speak to people, strangers, who we will never meet, right across the world. But so much of what we are doing is focused on being online, isn't it? I went into the Oxford Union today and I said, do you take cash? They said, no. I said, okay. I said, I'm trying to keep the cash economy going because I know there's so many people who haven't got access to a card. And it's not just one place, it's happening all over. But what's also happening is as we stay in, there are fewer opportunities for us to practice conversation with strangers, be it at conferences, festivals, you have a medical appointment, you go into a shop to buy something, you're on a train. So these opportunities, as we stay in, are shrinking, especially as high streets as well are losing their banks, the shops, on online shopping. So it has to be a choice to have a leap of faith and speak to people. Now, some people got the gift of the gab. The gift of the gab I looked up today. She said, but what does it mean? I've said it now and then. What does it actually mean? How is it being defined? And it's something from the 17th century, whereby that person has the skill to make people feel special, to make people enjoy listening to them and conversing with them, to gain the trust of that person speaking, to be entertained by that person. I thought, that's not me. Do I have to be that? You don't have to be anything. You just have to trust yourself and care about the people you're speaking to. As I sit here looking into your eyes, you can hear my stammer there, in to your eyes. As I stand here, I'm seeing you. And that's the first step. So, the benefits of conversations with strangers. You step out of your comfort zone. You don't know them. They don't owe you anything other than maybe respect. You don't owe them anything. You don't have to speak to them. So when you do, that's an act of generosity. It is a gift. Also, you build resilience because you're getting information that you don't expect and you're having to adapt to that information. You're having to look into someone's eyes and be present. But you can always leave the conversation. Always remember that I say you don't have to stay in someone's presence. You can just leave them and just say, it's been lovely meeting you. Another thing is you become adaptable. In having to negotiate someone's reality and the way that they're speaking to you, be it a child, an adult, someone's older than you, someone with different views from you, you get practice. Whereas if you only speak to people who you know, who think the same way as you, that input that can really build your thinking, your ability to deal with conflict and different ideas, you don't learn as quickly. So a leap of faith, once again. Also, you're more likely to get promotion. This is what the books say that I've read, because you're more adaptable, you're able to converse with a variety of people from different cultures, different belief systems, and to deal with conflict. And therefore, when people see that quality in you and compare it to people who are fixed, which can sometimes happen if what you're getting is reinforcement of your ideas, of the people you know, then you don't have that practice. You don't have as much flexibility because you will grow. And this is the thing, it allows you to grow, to adapt, to hear different views, and strangers will surprise you. And that element of surprise means you have to think in the moment and respond. Another point is that with electronics, we condense things. If we do a text, we have to keep the information short. The email's never as complicated as if you're having a conversation with someone. We try to shorten the words, and what that's trained many of us to do is to not have complexity within our speech when we speak to someone. We condense our thoughts, and sharing our thoughts and ideas. The temptation is to get that information across in a nice, kind way, whatever. But then it's not as flexible, as fulfilling. It's certainly not using our capacity, our imagination. So we are going to look at deconstructing what is conversation. Many people think it starts with what you say, but in fact, it starts with being in the same space as that person. What context is it? Is it a professional context? Is it a party? Is it a social event? Is it a medical event? And when you step in that space, it does something to you. You notice the space, and then you behave accordingly. So I would not go to a medical appointment, maybe dancing or joking. I would try to do what is appropriate. So appropriate behavior also helps. The next thing is listen, listen, listen. Take in the other person. And if it's an exchange, you're keeping tabs on how the other person is without consciously doing. If you're really interested in someone, and everyone has something to give you, something to share, because no one is like you. If you are interested in people, then it doesn't become a huge effort. But you can train yourself if you're frightened or less confident. The little exchanges, the little touches, you go into a shop maybe to buy some groceries, and you make eye contact with a person and you just say, thank you, how are you today? I'm fine. That is a conversation. So you can build up your confidence with these little exchanges until you find yourself in a situation where you have to have a full-on conversation with someone. A friend of mine said to me, when I am talking to one person at a time, that's fine. I can do it. But when it's more than one person, I don't know what to say. And I become quiet and I feel locked out. And I don't know why I'm like that. I don't want to be like that. And that got me thinking, because once someone has said it, I start to hear other people saying different variations of it. And I thought, well, maybe that's why it's great to see so many people here. Maybe other people might be interested in just how conversation works. Various cultures over centuries have equated or talked in the language of human communication in terms of the elements. Here it is air, water, fire, and earth. When I was working at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, we talked in terms of the air, the watery emotions, the fire, and earth. So it's embedded in our language. Blue sky thinking, the head. Your head's in the cloud. You look at the language, it associates what's happening here with what's happening there. Here, we think of our judgment. intelligence, morality, our logic, our memory. So that is air. Here is our emotions, watery emotions, flowing, ebbing, flowing, sometimes just deep and settled. Love, warmth, consideration, empathy is all here. Here, in our stomach or our gut, we actually, I've heard many people say it's their second brain. It thinks before this. And sometimes we give more value to our gut instinct. I feel it here. My gut tells me. And sometimes we make that rule what our logic is telling us. My gut tells me, I feel it here, my anxiety, and that is your instinct rather than here. And finally, earth is being grounded. And the language we use for our physical body is I'm off balance. That's really throwing me off of balance, not literally, but metaphorically. Off balance. I'm going to hold my ground. How dare they? I'm going to take a stance on this. I'm going to draw the line. It stops here. But what really helps is when all of these are flowing and working with us in our conversation with strangers, in our conversation with people we know, because then we have a language, we've identified how it works, and then therefore we have a choice. Because if you mainly, because we have our favorites, some people, they focus more on their head decisions and meeting someone, and they're meeting someone through judgment, intelligence, figuring things out, logic, but their heart, they're reserving for someone else, some other situation. And if they're talking to someone who operates from here, then there's a disconnect, there's a distance because they haven't allowed heart to heart. It can really affect conversations you have, not just with strangers, but in your professional life, in your social life. So if you listen to someone, if you really take them in, you notice in their language and in their body whether they are leading more from an emotional point of view. And that's not to say that someone who's in their head doesn't lead sometimes with their emotion, but if you identify, then you can change what's happening in that moment. Your empathy. Just pause and step back. That's very good to manage conflict, because as people get heated, just pause. Paulina in Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, when everything is falling apart and the kingdom is under dire threat because the king is behaving in an irrational and violent way, the first thing she does is step in and say, pause a while. And that would be my advice to you. When you feel things are slipping away, just pause a while and listen. If you're dealing with conflict, if you're feeling in any way unstable, just take a breath and pause a while. So, when we are speaking to strangers, eye contact, so if you just look around the room and you've got maybe 15 seconds to make sure you make eye contact with as many people as possible. Off you go. Don't forget the very back row. See whether you can stand up. Around. There's 5 more seconds. Okay, so you're not, those people who are strangers to you are no longer complete strangers. You've made a connection with them. You've seen them. And another thing is, with conversation with strangers, people need to be seen. They need to feel that they matter. So that it's as if you're throwing a bubble, a warm bubble, over yourself and the person you're speaking to. And that can start with a smile, just a little smile. So instead of saying hello, you might say hello. Doesn't have to be hi, just hello, because we interpret that as a welcoming smile. We're not saying that you like me automatically, but that you're making the effort to give me the gift of a smile. So this time, have a look and just say hello to people with a little smile. Just say hi, hello, in whatever way you want. You know, people just that little bit better. And it's nice because when you give it, you receive it back. Another tip. When we speak to someone, we don't want to exclude other people. Say you're talking to someone and you haven't introduced the person next to you. The bubble can be as big as you want. It doesn't just have to be around you, and you don't have to be talking to that other person. But if you can just give them a glance to feel included until you're ready to introduce them. But sometimes we get so caught up in a conversation. So we bump into someone who we don't know very well, and there was someone who we do know well, and we throw the bubble over the person who we know well. And the other person is feeling more like a stranger than ever before, really excluded, and that can be painful. Especially if you're in a position of authority, and that does not mean necessarily being a professor, but in that moment you have some power. You could be a child. Children have a lot of power. People want to please children, and you are forgiven for excluding adults and talking to the child. But the thing is, we do that with other adults as well. So be mindful of taking care of strangers as well. Because when you are a stranger, there's a vulnerability that you feel when someone seems to know each other, but you are excluded. When we speak, we cannot assume that everyone understands us. We have to want to be understood. And it's not about just the words. It's about heart to heart. Because it requires a lot of effort. We have this internal monologue going, which we need help for someone to cut through. And when we're speaking to someone, eye contact and emotion, just a little bit of warmth, helps that person to understand us. And if that person's first language is different to ours, slow down. Or if for any reason you feel the person is not keeping pace with what you are saying, maybe they have a headache, it's been a long day, you help them by slowing down. When we think of great speakers, they speak really slowly. They let the point land. In the pauses, they hold you. So if I was to do it, I'd say, hello, welcome. So today, I'm going to talk about the art of conversation. Conversation with strangers, a leap of faith. That maybe gives it gravitas. It may sound a little bit slow, but sometimes that's what people need. And you have to take in that as well. I remember there was a time, I want to think back to this. It still, in a way, makes me feel watery here. I was in Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. It was the second week of rehearsals. And I had been spending a lot of my time as an artist in my studio painting for an art exhibition that I had coming up. And I had to get about 20 paintings, new collection of paintings ready. So I did what I should not have done. I started to sleep in the studio. I'd bring my food, go to studio, work from morning until midnight and just fall asleep. And I did that for about 2 weeks. And then the job started. And what I found was I had forgotten how conversations work. No one had told me how they work, but I found that when we had our tea breaks and coffee breaks, I didn't know how it worked. I thought, how do people do it? How do they know what to say? How come I don't know what to say? What has happened to me? And it got to a point when I felt so isolated because people say, "Hi, Joy, how are you? What's happening?" I said, "Fine." Then it turned to someone else to speak because I wasn't giving anything back. And I found myself in the coffee breaks sitting alone, just trying not to cry. And then the youngest actress in the company, the youngest actor, she came up to me during the coffee break. She said, "Joy, are you okay?" And I said, "I don't think so." And she sat beside me and she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I can't do it. I don't know how to speak to people anymore. I don't know." And she said, "Joy, this is temporary because you knew how to do it before. I will be with you during every coffee break. I will sit with you. And when you want to talk to people or they want to talk with you, I will include you in the conversation. Or you don't have to say anything." And she did that. And after about 3 days, I was back to normal. What a shock it was to me that that could happen when I'm normally someone who chats a lot. That it could so quickly leave you. And then I met another artist and she said, "Oh, this always happens." I wish someone had told me because then I could have been prepared for it. One other thing is the tics or the repetitive things we say and do. And maybe you can practice this. So maybe you can think of things that people say and do that punctuates what they're saying. So listen, right, I was, I was walking down the road, and right, I was thinking, right, that I should maybe have left, earlier. So try speaking to someone and punctuate it with a filler. They call fillers. You just put it in as often as possible, but making it sound natural, right? So you've got 30 seconds just to do that with someone. Now, if you're not used to doing it, just do it methodically. But you know something? You don't have to be really high. We all do it. We all have these fillers, ums and ahs, and we are often not aware of how much we do it. And it undermines what we're saying. The listener notices it, especially if they don't use the same fillers. And when you punctuate it like that, that's okay. But instead of doing that, if you could just now and then just pause, I was thinking, "Oh, I should have left home earlier," compared to, I was thinking, right, that maybe, I should have, left home earlier. Okay, in your peer group and people who are used to that, your family, but in a professional environment, that may not be helpful. So take note of what your own personal, maybe say your filler is, what gets you through a sentence, and just reduce it a little. But once you become aware of it, you can do something about it, like putting a pause when you would normally do it. You just keep that listening ear open to your fillers. Swearing. Some people love swearing, and certain environments is fine. But the thing with swearing is like smoking. Everybody around you who hears it or breathes it in is affected by it because swearing is powerful. And we all have an emotional response to hearing someone else swear. We may swear ourselves, but hearing someone else swear when we're not expecting draws our attention because we associate that also when people get angry, they may swear. And so we pay attention, but it can also define how people think of you. Nothing wrong with swearing, I have to say. But if you want to be aware of the impact you're having on others, you cannot assume that because you like it, other people are not impacted by it. And if you do want to pay attention to people in your vicinity who are hearing it, then maybe you may want to reduce it or limit it at times, because if you are working and you're in a professional environment and someone overhears you swearing and they may feel differently for whatever reason, we either move towards someone or we move back from someone. We're drawn to someone or we draw back from someone because we need a little bit more space. Speaking of personal space, we each have a different personal space, especially when it comes to different cultures. But also our experiences in life means that it's constantly changing, and it's changing with the person we are speaking with. So if you're speaking to someone and you notice them stepping back a little bit, don't step forward. In order to get close, in order to get your point across, just give them the space. And if you notice that they are sideways on for you, don't try to follow them around. You're facing them because you don't know why they need that open space. It may be they're trying to just check out everything, and that it may be a condition. We don't know. But just take note and do respect the fact that they need that extra space and they need to be side on. I see that it's just after 6 o'clock. So I would say practice, 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 because you can always get better. So if you find it difficult to have conversations with strangers, volunteer for something. Lots of events happen at Kellogg College. Maybe you could contact the events team, say, hey, this is welcome weeks. Is anything you welcome weeks? Do you want me to do anything? Oh, you've got the festival on. Can I volunteer for a couple of hours? Then you stop being isolated. You talk to people and you're fed by that person's spirit. So do put yourself out there, reach out. And there's nothing wrong with silence. If you enter a room and you don't know anyone, do it more frequently. Maybe leave if you're going to meet someone, turn up maybe 15 minutes early. That's what I did, and it was scary. I would never go, there was a time I'd never go into a pub alone because I would think I don't know anybody, I have no friends. And this was years ago, I have to say, when I did a lot of touring. And therefore, I would be eating alone or eat in the hotel room. Maybe many of you do, rather than go down to breakfast and lunch or dinner, or you sit with the people who you already know. I force myself to sit with people who I don't know, and invariably they'll start talking to me. And no matter how much you think you haven't got anything in common with them, you are all human beings. And that is what you have in common. There will be things that unless you talk to the person, you will never know that that person could be a friend. Maya Angelou, the writer, philosopher, singer, the American, gifted human being, gifted with communication, she said, and this is not an exact quote, but it's the essence of a quote I discovered a week ago. It said, a friend may be hiding behind the face of a stranger. A friend may be hiding behind the face of a stranger. I'll move on to health and safety. I'm not at all advocating that you go out there and you talk to a complete stranger. I'm talking about meeting strangers within an environment where you have to or you want to. I talk to a lot of strangers. I do. If I buy a ticket, I say, hi, how are you today? They say, I'm fine, we're great. And then they start talking to me. And it just makes me feel warm and happier because I feel connected. Community is based on a sense of feeling connected and feeling you have something to contribute, which is valued. But if you don't think you have that, it just makes things harder. You are what you contribute. You are enough. So when you speak to a stranger, it's a leap of faith and just say hello. Small talk. You think, well, small talk doesn't really get you connected. But the whole purpose, or one of the purposes of small talk, is it gives you a chance to tune in to someone in a safe way. You say, hello. The person says, hello. How are you? You pick up so much information with your gut instinct for everything. Is it safe? Is this person giving me a smile? Does this person see me? Will I understand what that person is saying? Do I need to slow down so that they can understand me? And within a few seconds of hello, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. Gosh, the weather is really cold today. We've had so much rain. It's important because you are feeling your way into tuning in to the person. So don't underestimate the power of basic conversation. You don't have to have the gift of the gab. You don't have to entertain the person. Some of us, not me, but some of us, it comes naturally. We're able to really connect. And often it's because we like it. We like people. We like speaking to people. And then it comes easily, but we have to understand that we cannot dominate the conversation. We have to step back and give that person a space to contribute. Otherwise, you're using them as a sounding board. You're doing the talking, trying to reassure them, telling them what's happening, but you're not allowing them to be part of the give and take. And that means if they're finding it difficult to talk to someone, even if they know you, unless you invite them in and give them that space, so you don't just say hello, how are you? And they said fine. How are you? I'm fine. You know what happened? I was, and you go on, and then they're like that. Be kind, be generous, and just say, how are you? He said, I'm fine. That's good. What have you been doing? Open-ended questions. So if you find it difficult to speak to someone or you are shy, use open-ended questions or help the person with open-ended questions. Say, how did you hear about this event? They can't say yes, they can't say no, but you're allowing them to speak, to share something about themselves. Did you travel far? Where from? Open-ended questions. And you can ask that the person if you are shy as well. You see someone who is alone, you think, well, they're alone and I'm alone. And you walk past and you just say, do you mind if I join you? And they say, no, that's fine. And you let the silence reign. And if they are talking, you could say, do you know anyone here? They'll say yes or no. Say, neither do I. Or yes, I do know someone here. Who do you know? And I was like, so you've been to one of these conferences before. How long ago? What did you attend? Talk about what is happening in the moment is a subject, or the other alternatives, you come prepared. You think, what am I interested in? What am I passionate about? And it could be hobbies or anything, but it's normally good if it's to do with the event. And you think maybe 2 questions, something that I can share or that I want to learn. And soon you won't have to do that anymore because the more you practice, the easier it becomes. There's a few things that I wanted to share with you about my experiences with strangers. I was going to read from my diary, but it takes a long time to read every detail, such as the context, but I will read, yes. The Onion Man. when I've been in this country, I come over from Guyana. I've been in this country for maybe 5 years. And in those days, people left their front doors open. It was happening, you may not be able to believe it, but people left their doors open. And my mum, myself, my sister who was a year older, must have been about, I don't know, 8 or 9, and my little brother were sitting there, and the door opened, the someone had come upstairs, and this man walked in to our room. He was disheveled, and he didn't say a word. And where there was a seat, he just sat down. My heart was in my mouth, thinking, what's going to happen? And my mum said to him, "Are you hungry?" And he nodded. During the whole time he was with us for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, he didn't speak. She said, "What would you like? I have some food here." He said, and he pointed to an onion. And he was chopping. Oh, and he took the whole onion, and of course, many people eat raw onions, but in those days, I had never come across someone who would eat a raw onion. And he ate the onion, skin and all, like an apple, which to us children was like magic. How could he stand the taste? And we were riveted. Then out of his pocket, he took some mess, and he drank that. He bowed, and he left. But his visit stayed with us for a long time, and we looked at our mother with such admiration. She didn't know this stranger, and yet she welcomed him. Although we'd only been in this country for a short time, she saw something in him. She paid attention, and she listened to his new needs. Another one was a taxi driver. I went to a Mark Bolan concert. Some of you may have heard of Mark Bolan. He was around the same time as David Bowie. If you haven't heard of David Bowie's, they were pop stars. And I was a big Mark Bolan fan. And recently we'd moved to a new flat in Hackney. And I was about 17. I went to the concert, had a great time. Nighttime came, and I thought, how do I get home? You didn't have the night buses the same way you do here. So I got as far as I could, and I could not think, do I turn left? Do I turn right? And then I saw a taxi coming, and I waved down the taxi. And I said, "Excuse me?" No, excuse me? Can you drive me home? I don't know where I am. I'm lost. I just moved into this area. And the taxi driver said, I said, "I don't have money, but when we get to my flat, I'll run upstairs and I'll ask my mum, I'll wake my mum up, I'll ask her for the money and she'll give it to me and I'll give it to you." He said, "Okay, hop in." So he drove around for a good 15 minutes in like a mile radius, trying to find out which of these many blocks of flats I lived in. And eventually I said, "No, that's it, yes, that is it." I said, "So you wait here." And he said, "No, it's okay, love. Have a nice life. Don't worry about the money. You take care of yourself, okay?" And he went. A total stranger. And I'm sure that you've been very generous with other strangers as well. You've helped them and they've helped you. And finally, because I'm leaving 15 minutes for our question and answers, is mind the gap. We all know that saying, we've even got t-shirts, mind the gap. Because conversations with strangers doesn't necessarily have to be words. Maybe 10 years ago, I wasn't minding the gap. And I had a book or something in my hand and didn't actually pay attention, hear, mind the gap. And the train was full and people were full and the gap was huge. You know, when it's a real bend and the gap maybe is like that. And I went to step down, not looking, and I felt an arm, a hand on my elbow that just eased me forward. And then I saw what could have happened. That could have changed the course of my life because it was deep. And when I looked across, it was a young woman, aged about, 23, blonde hair, and she looked at me and she smiled. I said, thank you so much. And she smiled again. She went her way and I went my way. She took care of me in that moment. And I always eternally remember that. And finally, I was all dressed up to go out, maybe about 5 years ago. And there were a bunch of school children walking towards me. I had my flared skirt, my big earrings, a little bit of, swish here and swish there. And I was walking past, and the school children were aged about 7 years old. And there was a little girl, they holding each other's hands, and they're coming towards me. And the little girl said, "Hello, get you!" And I looked at her back at me, and her smile and my smile, that connection that we had in that moment, totally unexpected. Something happened, and we just connected. And some friends that I've made for years have been unexpected friendships, which have happened within 30 seconds. So what I'm saying is take a leap of faith. Take care of other people who may not be as confident as you are, or remember the times when you aren't feeling confident, but you manage to have the tools to still make contact and have a good conversation. And it's to do with your thoughts, your judgment, your heart, your empathy, your emotions, your gut instincts, and that keeps you safe as well as helping you to make decisions. Because if someone is over focusing on you, if they're not giving you their space, if they're asking intrusive questions, leave. Don't allow it to go. Don't be polite. Just say, "Excuse me," and you ask for help or you have a conversation with someone else. But don't put yourself in danger. The signs are usually there that the person isn't letting you go in the way that you want or hope to. So there's some key things that will set you on the way to conversation with strangers. I hope you found it useful. Thank you so much for coming. Take care. Bye.